decided to be taller tonight. All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attending the work session and call board meeting of the Bexar County Board of Education on the 17th of November. We're glad that you're all here. We have two of our board members joining us from home tonight. So we're going to review the board meeting agenda. Mr. Raper, you'll have the invocation and the pledge Tuesday. And we'll need to approve the minutes, of course, on the agenda. Didn't have a clean schools report this month. But we are going to have a superintendent's recognition.
We will. We've got a couple winners for the holiday card competition.
Excellent. Those are always great to get. And have we had any requests thus far to appear before the board?
No, ma'am.
Okay, great. Dr. Green, support services report.
Yes, ma'am. The communications report is there for you. I would like to refer to page 3. This time of year, we typically have our Partners in Education Luncheon, but because of COVID, we had to cancel that. But that doesn't mean that we needed to cancel our expression of appreciation to our Partners in Education, particularly those at the district level. So we're going to have a campaign that started actually in October and will go through the middle of December to thank our Partners in Education for the tremendous impact that they have on the work that we do. You'll see in the report the different weeks that we're featuring a particular partner. We're thanking them on social media. We're using student thank you videos. We're using handwritten thank you notes from schools and from students. And we've been celebrating since October, and we'll continue to celebrate right up to the middle of December. The Barrow News Journal has partnered with us, and each week that we're celebrating a partner, they're writing an article, a feature article on that partner and the work that they're doing in the school system. So that's something that is a creative way that we were able to find to accomplish the same purpose, which is to let our partners in education know how much we appreciate them and how big an impact they have. Even when we couldn't have a luncheon and feed them some food, we're getting the word out and telling our community of just how important they are to us. So I just wanted to bring your attention to that, and that's all I have for tonight.
Very good, thank you. Dr. Matt Thompson, the enrollment report.
Yes, ma'am. We had a 60-day count last week, and it is posted for your review.
All right. Is that it?
That's all.
Okay. Ms. Houston, business services.
Good evening. We had our invoices between $10,000 and $24,999 for the month of November. We had Tech Optics for $16,320 for Mitel Voice over IP for Heyman Morris Middle School. That is not district-wide. We also had Tech Optics for capital projects, $24,129 for the BASA video wall and installation. That was over in BASA. Sayers Technology, general fund for $15,330 for Paleo Alto firewall renewal. This is cybersecurity and it's an annual license. We have the SAP America General Fund, $19,259. This is for a report writer for our MUNIS programs and Crystal programs and some of our student programs too. It kind of is a report writer for that, and that's an annual license for that. And that's all we have for our invoices this month.
All right, any questions?
Yes, technology's not cheap, is it?
Just for our PPE, I just said that we're always going to give you this monthly report on this. The only thing really new on this report is we ordered 3-ply disposable masks, 6,700 of them. And then also we are spending a little bit of that Bethlehem church grant that we got for our special education. We got some cube chairs, some sensory supplies, fidgets and sensory supplies. And then they also ordered some trampolines with handrails, which is much needed in the classroom. And that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, system operations report, Mr. Furno.
Good evening. Our report tonight again centers on Westside Middle School. I can tell you that the slab on grade is complete, structural steel is complete. The exterior block and roof decking is well underway right now. In the next 30 days, we expect to have that roof decking complete, the exterior block complete, and the roof underway at that point in time. So things are really moving along well there. And with the pictures there, you can see kind of a neat thing there. Kendall and Charles Black Construction put together a little signing of one of the final beams that went in place on site there. So I think it was an 8th grade engineering class that came out and participated in that. And they got to ask some questions and have a little Q&A out there on the lawn. But so that was a neat thing to get the kids involved. And there's just some photos of the progress. Again, you know, the roof decking is nearly complete right now. There's the exterior block. So coming right along.
It's amazing.
They're moving quick.
Very cool.
That's our report.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks for the update.
Teaching and learning report, Dr. Moon.
For the teaching and learning report, Mrs. Persinger is going to give us an overview of the graduation rate information. The Georgia Department of Education released information for state and district levels on November 10th. And so Jenny's going to go into detail about Carroll County Schools data.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. So yes, we normally would be presenting our CCRPI scores or accountability scores at this point. But as you know, things were so odd in the spring. There were no assessments in the spring. There were no, the state had a waiver for accountability issued by USCD, the Department of Education. So we don't have all of that information to give you, but we do still have a grad rate that would normally be part of that CCRPI. So you can see that we've put in here a trend where we were showing a steady increase. We had one little dip a couple years ago and then had been increasing again. And then this year we dipped down a little bit again. So obviously, as soon as we have the numbers, and even before that, when we were looking at the data, we were already digging in, the schools are digging in and looking at what's happening. The district personnel are digging in to see what happened. So Suzanne, if we can go to the next slide, let me give you a brief understanding of how this is even calculated. While it makes sense that we're talking about the spring 2020 seniors, that's not really how this number comes about. So any student enrolled in either of our high schools that with any time a student enrolls, we have to put what date they started 9th grade. We have a 9th grade entry date. So this grad rate for 2020 goes back all the way to anyone in our schools, whether they were currently enrolled or not, who had a 9th grade entry date of fall of 2016. So they could have been with us for a month back in the fall of 2016 and then left, but they're part of our calculation, or we at least have to track them. So they end up falling into 3 basic categories. Either they graduate within their 4 years, they are non-grad, and there are several different reasons. Either they're still an active student the last day of school that 4th year, they have left and gone and gotten a GED, they have been removed for lack of attendance. So if you remember, there are, it is by law, with state law, that we remove a student who we have not heard from in 10 days. If they are gone for 10 consecutive school days, if we have tried to contact them, we can't find them, they don't have a valid reason of where they've been, we are to unenroll, withdraw them from school. And then there are some that are unknown, and I'll explain in a minute what the difference is and why they would be unknown. If you look down at the reasons a student could just be removed from the calculation, it's because we know they transferred. We have some documentation that they went to another school, whether it was in Georgia, out of state, out of the country, they went to a private school, they went to homeschool, they just get removed from the calculation. They weren't a grad, but they weren't a non-grad. They'd gone on to somebody else's graduation rate. So what happens if they're not in another Georgia public school system is the Georgia Department of Education doesn't know that they actually went anywhere. So we have to produce documentation. Now remember I said they could have been with us for 1 month 4 years ago. I have to be able to produce that documentation that they actually moved to South Carolina or North Dakota or Alaska, wherever they said they were going. And we've learned over the years that you can't wait 4 years to track down that documentation. So what our registrars do is tag them as unknown, but then put what they reported. They reported they were going to South Carolina and then are continually tracking. We're either waiting for a records request from that school, or we're trying to contact that school to get verification that the student actually showed up and enrolled. But those that we never get that documentation on are still coded as unknown. So that's why that exists. And it's different from those that we know just quit showing up, lack of attendance. Sometimes those students go to work, those have gone on to something else. But the ones that we are told are going to another school system and then don't end up being unknowns for us. So on the next screen, you will see how our 3-year comparison of the total number of students in each category. So you can see how many were in the cohort altogether, how many we graduated each year, how many were those considered non-grads, so they were either active, still working at the end of 4 years, those unknowns, those removed for lack of attendance, or then those transfers that just come out of the calculation. So when I actually go back and look at the non-graduates, on the next screen, you can see the comparison, and we had a larger number than normal of active students, those students that were still active at the end of 4 years. So first, I just need you to remember back to March the 12th. When we suddenly had to shift gears and we had announced that we were going to close schools for 2 weeks, and then we stopped going anywhere and no one left their house, and for the whole month of April, things were not open, and then it was announced that no Georgia public school would go back for the end of the school year. So we were quickly shifting gears, and you will remember we were trying to get technology to students. We were trying to get food to students. We were trying to teachers, I know you, we've talked about how hard teachers were working to engage students and teach students in a different way. But we didn't have the ability for our school social workers to go out to do home visits to those students that quit engaging with us. If they were not, normally if the students are not coming to school, we don't just withdraw them lack of attendance without doing some investigation. The school social worker would actually go out to the home and look for those children and try to touch base. We didn't have that ability. We were having to reinvent ways to reach out to children. So in the end, we did have a handful that just didn't graduate and were still active with us the last day of school. Now, as we go back and look, I looked last week at those 65 students. As of last week, where were they? Well, so some of them are still active with us. They're still working to graduate and complete their requirements. A large number have transferred. They just didn't transfer before the last day of school. They may have transferred the next day, but for that, they still count as active for us at the end of the year. A couple have gone on to get GEDs, and then there's still a chunk that we have not found. They're not at the homes. We're now doing some home visits. They're not there. They didn't show back up for the next school year. They could have moved, and we just don't know it.
Jenny, when you say they're not in the home, so our social workers are going out and finding that the family is not there, or
Correct.
just the family's not there? So they've obviously gone somewhere.
Or if they have reached out and found a family, it could be some of these students have now joined the workforce. There's something happened during that pandemic time that a parent might have been laid off or something for whatever reason, a child needed to go to work. And so they're technically now unknown because we don't have, that they didn't withdraw to transfer, they didn't withdraw to get a GED. They just are now working, so they're technically still tagged as unknowns.
Okay, so in 2020, we had a total of 65, 30, 200 students total that would not have counted as part of our graduation rate. And 65 of those are still active in our system. Is that what we're saying? They're
We
just
had
not making the
65 that were
field.
active the last day of school in May.
Okay, so where are those 65 now? Do we?
That's what that little box shows. Some of them are still active, some have gone ahead and transferred elsewhere. So I will tell you, back in May, I know our schools tried to contact any of the children they could find. If it was just that they were missing those few credits that they didn't finish, they offered some course extension. That worked for a few kids. We got some kids the credits they needed and were able to graduate. Some we still, like I said, were not able to find them, so that didn't work. But like I said, each school has gone back into each of these individual children, trying to find as much information as we can. I don't think it was a lack of effort to try to track students. Like I said, over 4 years, we have worked on finding documentation for where students transfer. It just was a weird time in the spring, and the schools are not trying to make excuses. They're looking into it. It just was a odd time, and we had some students that we just didn't touch base with at the end of the school year.
So if I'm reading this correctly, just because I think I understand it, or I thought I did when I read it the first time. So of these 200 students, 31% of those are still active were active on the last day of school.
That was of the 65 students. The 65 active students,
31%.
31% are still active as of last week. They're
Okay.
still working on
I
their
think,
requirements.
I think Jenny is at 135 total non-graduates, and then 65 of those are
Correct.
active, so it's not,
So 135 of those
135,
makes
not
up we removed for lack of attendance, or they
Okay.
withdrew and
Alright.
never transferred.
Okay,
total, yeah.
thank you. Math is not my strong suit.
Other
Thanks.
questions?
Let me ask a quick question here. This is Gary Huff. Of those 65 that are still active, there's no way to get those off the roll.
If those that have transferred, so when it shows below that 30% of those 65 have since transferred, they're no longer on our books and will now count as the grad rate of that school system where they transferred. Like, for example, some went to Foothills.
Okay, so we do get some of them off the list.
Correct. So because the state does also track a 5-year grad rate, they want to know that these students did finish in 5 years, if not in 4. But those students won't count for us. The ones that 31% that are still active, we're diligently working to get them their requirements
For the 5 years.
so that they will graduate within 5 years. That's a good question.
Thank you.
This is Beverly Kelly. I've got a question on that, but the ones that, you said a lot of them, and it makes sense because of COVID, had to quit school to help, especially in a Title I district.
Right.
To work. How do we compare with other Title I districts? Have we looked at that with other districts in the state?
We can compare grad rates. We can't get as granular as to what those numbers mean. Like, I don't know in those systems, how many of those are still considered unknown or how many would have gone to work.
I mean, as a state, like, because when the state looks at those numbers and puts those numbers out there and people say, oh, their number dropped like that.
Yeah.
How can we?
So we're still above the state grad rate, but the state did see an increase this year. They just still have not caught up to where we are. So we're still above the state
Yeah,
in 4-year grad rate.
but my concern is when parents as a whole look at that number and they say, oh, Appalachia dropped 5 percentage points,
Right.
even though it's still, it makes a big difference when you look and see that
Right,
a bunch of those, and because of COVID, and it makes a big difference,
absolutely.
had to drop out. We're a Title I district. That makes a big, big difference. You can't compare Barrow County to another district that's not a Title I district that doesn't have those same things. is
Yeah,
what
that's
I'm
always
saying.
kind of been
So
the
I don't
problem
know.
with rating, with these type of
So,
ratings.
that's my
Yeah.
problem when the state
Yeah.
does something like that. I just didn't know if there was a way for us to look or even have something to compare to of other Title I districts.
We can compare grad rates to them.
Yeah.
We just won't know.
Just not
But
those,
not the
those,
levels.
those sector of students.
I think we'd all feel better if some of the Title I districts around us had their rates fall as much as ours
It was a
did.
mix. Some
Or
some
even
did
just to see how many-
and some went up. I mean, it was a mix. And I think, one thing we're still kind of looking at too is there was a piece with the special education, the kids that have been in for a while, maybe 20, 21 years old, those type of things. And some of the districts had a high percentage of those, we didn't. And so that didn't help us where it helped some other districts. It actually helped the whole state in some ways too. So that piece didn't fall for us where it did for some other districts. And honestly, I think it for us, it shows we pretty much held our expectations as close to where we were, even with what was going on. So
I will say, I'm proud to say that our schools kept that a Bear County diploma means something. We didn't just give them away because
Absolutely.
things were odd.
absolutely.
We still held students to high standards.
But you're right. And I think, and even looking from one side of the county to the other, we know that we had more that went to work on one side of the county than the other. So, those type of things, but that's not something we can go to another county and get that information to compare. Unfortunately, it would be interesting to look
I
at.
appreciate you breaking that out for us, because when somebody questions us, that helps us to say, hey, here's what it is. I mean, because otherwise we wouldn't know.
Well, and that's part of the work that we're doing and that the schools are doing is to be able to understand, we're not just going to accept a drop and move on. We're trying to understand.
And they're also looking too, not just at their senior year, they're going back and looking at the years we've had them and see where our gaps are, what we can improve going forward.
Were they behind a bunch of credits or was it
Right,
just?
were they
their
behind
spring
going into
credits
senior
that
year?
didn't-
That's a big piece of it. Were they or not? So those are some things we have to look at.
So I appreciate all that information. That helps me.
Yep.
When I get asked those questions, that helps me.
And I guess for us as a school district, the unknown figure being so big is concerning.
It is, and it's unusual, but I think it's because we didn't have a
I
way to
mean,
find children.
if you had some idea where these students were or what had happened to them, you've got a better way to tackle the problem.
Right.
But it would be interesting to know, like Ms. Kelly says, if we knew the current status of some of the school districts around us, if they're seeing the same percentages of loss that we are, if it's, if the ones that didn't graduate, 40% of theirs are unknown or somewhere around that.
Right.
Yeah.
And we'd have to ask them that because the
Yeah.
state won't give us that.
Yeah.
Information.
Well, I think it would be fair to say that basically, we know, based on the demographics of one of our schools as opposed to the other, that a lot of those kids had to drop out and go to work to help with their families.
Yeah.
So when people ask me about this, I'm going to say COVID had a whole lot to do with it, because had we been able to maintain our normal standards, we would have been working to get these kids all graduated.
Well,
and
that's
they
it.
have
Our folks are really good at the schools, at both schools, of that last, during the spring, of getting those kids caught up, and we didn't have our arms around them. So, that's something that we need to look at and figure out, okay, what, is there a better way? Is there a way we could get ahead of that if it were to happen again? I mean, this is not something we could ever plan for, but now that we know it's something that can happen, we need to try to plan
Well,
for
and
it.
it's technically still happening now, and we still have some students
Absolutely.
learning
I
remotely, and we've
really
got to
honestly-
figure out how to make
yeah.
sure that those kids stay engaged.
I will not be surprised if next year's, because our juniors from last year are struggling, as we all know, and everyone, all our students are, and some from being out. So, this year is going to be an interesting one to see too, even with the hindsight we have now to move forward. I'm not going to be too surprised if we're still about the same level or see, even a decline across this year that might be more severe than this past year. So, much as I hate to be a naysayer or a, gloom and doom, we're going to work very, very hard to make sure that doesn't happen. But
I think in lots of ways.
these are
it's gonna have an
just
impact.
things we've never dealt with before.
I think the takeaway would be, this isn't a normal
No.
year to look and say, you really can't compare this side of the county versus because
It's tough.
COVID had a drastic effect
Yeah.
on one side of our county versus another based on.
Yeah, That's one way to look at it.
And I
Well,
will- oh, go-
let me, excuse me, can I make one comment? It might be interesting to know how this year compares to previous years. Do we have the same percentages? We can compare ourselves to ourselves in previous years, and where's the big red difference, you know, in comparing this year to our previous years? What percentage are unknown? What percentage transferred? You know, that might be useful. Have you looked at that, how we compare ourselves to
Yes.
previous?
What this slide represents is the biggest difference was the number of students still active at the end of 4 years. That just met requirements by the last day.
Yeah,
of
that,
their
I think,
4 years.
for a good example of that, Dr. Huff, is that transfer piece, that 30% with transfers.
Yeah.
If they had actually been physically in the schools and decided to transfer, we could have helped expedite that, and worked with them, or either got them not to transfer so we could work with them, or if they had to move or those type of things. And so those transfers actually happening after we closed the school year was one of the big ones for the active piece. That's what jumps out at me.
And likely,
We would have had 40% that we don't know what happened to them.
That's the other big piece, right?
and
And
part
again-
of what we know happened with some students is they physically moved, but didn't re-enroll in a new school system at the time.
Right.
They were in South Carolina, but still
Didn't
somehow
go back to
working
school
remotely or
after they
not.
Well,
moved.
how could they? The schools were closed. They probably, I mean, I'm sure the registrars weren't there.
Right.
So,
Right.
so, I mean, this is just an anomaly based on what's happened, I hope.
And I will say, because of the way it's calculated and the way we have to start as soon as they start ninth grade, I've already reached out to Dr. Simpson and we've had some conversations about as students are withdrawing from BASA now because they've moved, are we collecting the paperwork we
Right.
need? So we're already
Absolutely.
looking even with a new school opening.
Any other questions, comments?
Great job breaking that down for us. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Appreciate you. Okay, next we have planning and personnel, Ms. Beggs. Do we have anything at this time?
Nothing at this time.
Okay, we'll move right along. Under old business, the AP Human Geography textbook adoption. Still don't have the book. I meant to bring it back tonight, but I'll get it back Thursday. I must say that having reviewed this, I'm much happier with this textbook than I am some of the textbooks we've had in the past.
You just
This-
made my night, Ms. Stevens.
I know.
I just want you to know.
I told Dr. Michael to tell you were off the hook.
I was secretly hoping that, and he did, and I was like, yes. And as far as I know, we've had nobody comment
we
or
haven't.
ask questions.
No
about it.
comments.
So,
Well, I can truthfully say I did my due diligence. Okay, that was, and the superintendent recommends the textbook Human Geography, a Spatial Perspective for the High School Course Advanced Placement Human Geography, course number 45.07700, be removed from public review and approved. Do you guys want to put that on a consent agenda? Is that okay with everybody? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, under new business, construction manager at risk, Auburn Elementary, and transportation renovations, and BASA 2. Doesn't that sound good? BASA 2 already. Joe?
Okay. I'll preface both of these recommendations tonight with just a statement about how we packaged these together. And the first one, Ms. Stevens, you read there, Auburn Elementary School renovations, transportation renovations, BASA 2. And then the second package is renovations to Wholesome Neck, CFIT, and the new elementary school. And the reason that we've done that, we packaged it that way, is twofold, really. One is planning, just to get way out ahead. You know, that's really our goal, to get as far out ahead as we can with projects just in general. So we feel confident that our next two new schools will be BASA 2 and the new elementary school. We don't know the order. And, you know, I suppose there could be a curveball there, and we do something aside from those two, but That's our best guess at this point as to what our new schools will be. And so we packaged them in there with the renovations for the planning piece, number one, but also because contractors, for obvious reasons, are not wild about renovation projects. I mean, it's tough stuff. But when you can put a new school in that package, and they get interested, really interested. And so there's a competitive piece to it as well, for why we packaged it that way. So for this first one, our recommendation to the superintendent is to recommend Grail Construction to serve as construction manager at risk for the Auburn Elementary renovation, transportation renovation, and BASA Phase 2. System operations, we met as a group to discuss and deliberate and review each proposal. And we determined this firm to be the most responsive and responsible proposal in the best interest of Barrow County Schools. We've set a stated cost limitation for the project at for total of these projects at $25 million. And our construction manager recommendation, Grail, has reviewed that and they believe that's achievable. Okay, and obviously we can't look 4 or 5 years, however many years it might be for a new school and predict that. But the budget as it would stand today for those 3 projects, they believe that's achievable. And we've looked at it as well, and we believe the same thing. And
So are they willing to guarantee that price for those 3 projects, no matter when they start? Is that what we're saying?
No, ma'am. We'll bring a guaranteed maximum price to you all for each of these projects before they would be approved. So we'll bring you one for the Auburn renovation, one for the transportation renovations, and one for the new elementary school.
So just for planning purposes, you're thinking this is going to cost about $25 million?
Correct.
Okay.
But again, time and the effect of inflation and market conditions, that's going to affect that price of that new school. You know?
Yeah, that's why I hope you had gotten the same contract already.
Yeah. Well, and that's a great point, and we'll get to that with the next package here that we recommend. But for Auburn Transportation and BASA 2, we believe Grail is in our best interest to approve them. We looked at their proposal, we reviewed it, of course. We had a mandatory pre-proposal meeting with 6 firms, 2 submitted, Grail and Charles Black Construction. Grail has worked for us the last couple of years. They've done renovations to Yargo, to West Side, and Appalachia, and they've done an excellent job for us. So we've been able to see them firsthand in their team, and so we feel very comfortable making that recommendation. And I'm happy to answer.
Ms. Stevens, what is guaranteed and what we requested, the fee amount is locked in.
Okay.
Right, for the CM, yeah.
Good. Okay, and so Holzenbeck and
Yes.
CFIB renovations and the new elementary school, the superintendent's recommending Charles Black Construction for that?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay.
Same premise there. We reviewed the proposals and they've also put together a budget for the projects and believe that $25 million for that package of 3 is also achievable. So our recommendation is Charles Black Construction for renovations to Holzenbeck, CFIT, and the new elementary school. Ms. Stevens, you mentioned a grading package. That is our goal, is to get a separate package for grading of what in effect would be a building pad for a new elementary school, even a new middle school out there on that campus. And so to try to get ahead of inflation and position ourselves to just build the buildings. The site work there's so many variables with that, it's hard to pin that down. So we'd like to get that earthwork done possibly this summer, we can sweep down enough funds from these other projects. You know, they all have a guaranteed maximum price, but we're coming in under those GMPs on these projects, and we're sweeping that money into a bucket. We're going to try to help fund the cost of this early grading package. That's our goal.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about this?
Joe, you've had 6 firms at both of these meetings, and was it the same 4 did not submit proposals for both of them?
That's correct.
You have any idea why?
Sure. We've got some ideas about that.
You may not want to share them, but you do have some ideas about it.
We do.
Okay.
We do. I'll just say that the flashy books, the glossy pictures and all that, we're not so much interested in that. We want to see a budget. We want to see that you've done some work to look at these projects and tell us what your plan is for the budget and how you're going to construct it. And there's some folks that, you know, it's just not their thing. You know, they'd rather churn out a book and change names. And I don't mean to disparage any contractors when I say that. I'm just saying there's some that are really hungry and they're going to dig real deep. And we expect them to do that. So come up with a little interest in that aspect.
We have worked with both of these firms extensively over the years, and they've always done quality work. So I take it you're happy with these choices.
Absolutely. And it's not just the name of the company, but it's the individuals that will work with us. You know, we look to see who that team is. It needs to be the people that we're most comfortable with and that have shown us and proven to us, you know, they can handle what we throw at them. And both of these firms have. The teams they have in place are they're top shelf.
Yeah.
Charles Black built BASA and did our all those renovations this summer with the cameras and Statham, heavy renovation there. So they've all performed, or they both performed extremely well.
Yeah, and again, I want to echo too, that part's extremely important, but for me, the part of what Joe was saying with the depth of the proposals, that, you know, just like when you write a grant, to me, that's more my bailiwick, but, you know, the better the grant's written, the more chance you have of getting it. And if you just keep if you can turn in the same grant and change a few things, you're not going to pull them in. So for me, that's the biggest piece.
The competition is there. Trust me, these two are hungry.
Oh, yeah.
They went after it hard. I mean, we can say that we've looked back at the numbers, and between general conditions and feed, Bassett and Winder Elementary School were around 8.5%. Those summer renovations, those tough renovations were around 10.5% of these last couple of summers. And we're around 6.5 to 7.5% for these projects. So I know there were just 2 at the table. They're hungry. They don't want to get up from that table either.
Joe, you do good work. I love to watch you work with these folks.
That he does.
You know the workforce.
I know.
Sitting back at that table.
All right, does anybody have any other questions about this? Okay, are we happy with putting this on the consent agenda? I'm getting nods from the,
Yes, ma'am.
okay,
Yes.
okay, great. These 2 items go on the consent agenda also. Now, we need authorization for committees to meet. We will be having, of course, a meeting Thursday night too that you're all aware of. Bring your paperwork when you come. Those sessions usually take a maximum of 2 hours. If it starts to run longer than that because we're reworking something, we'll probably have another meeting later to do that. I don't want to keep you past 2 hours on this. So 6 o'clock Thursday for everybody. And we'll try to Zoom the meeting for those who can't be here. Okay. At this time, we're going to go into executive session to discuss or deliberate upon the appointment, employment, compensation, hiring, disciplinary action, or dismissal, or periodic evaluation or rating of a public officer or employee, or to interview applicants for the position of superintendent, and to review an appeal from a student disciplinary tribunal, per OCGA section 20-2-757.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Gentlemen?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, all right.
Okay.
At this time, folks, we'll need to, do we want to go in there or we
We'll
want
just
to?
do it here. We'll just give a second to go offline and we'll
All
just
right. We'll be back when we get through with this, folks.
clear the room. Thank y'all. It'll be